Ready to go? I think we're recording. I think we're good to go.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's good. Yeah, it is good morning or good afternoon, I guess, right?
It's afternoon somewhere.
Yeah, thanks for joining the coffee break. I appreciate it.
You bet. I've got my mug. It's got some kind of coffee. Could be like a coffee stout or something in it, but
I think a lot of people are switching over to stout these days. But what do you typically drink? I have to ask that before we start.
well, I do drink black coffee in the morning, like before 10 o'clock. I have my big Yeti full of coffee, and I've actually been mixing it with a little bit of lemon and some immunity builder stuff that my daughter recommended that I start using.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I just like it black.
Any kind of special brand that you prefer?
You know, we get the Costco and we grind up our own, the Kirkland. And I think it's provided actually by maybe Starbucks or something. But
Okay.
yeah, we grind our own.
Yeah, you haven't seen the intro I recorded for this yet, but I ground up a little Starbucks. We got some of the Reserve blend. It's delicious. I love it. So, cheers.
Cheers.
Yes. Okay, so typically I like to do stuff on site, but as we know in the world we live in today, it's not possible, COVID-19 stuff. So we're going back to the Zoom meeting type style. What have you been doing during the lockdown?
Lots of honeydew projects, actually. I am working still. We're open, or trying to, function remotely with KB Auto. But in the meantime, I've had a few project opportunities around the house that we had on the wish list. I'll show you one of them.
I think it's not a tour.
Actually, two of them. One is this hallway. I don't know how well you can see it, but laid down some wood flooring.
It's beautiful.
And knocked that out. And we also had we're empty nesters, and the girls moved out, a couple of years ago. And so we had a bathroom that was pretty well run down, totally stripped it out, repurposed this antique chest of drawers, turned that into a vanity, and laid down some tile. Trying to see how well, yeah, you can probably see the tile. Put up some wainscot. So redid the bathroom.
It's beautiful.
Been on the wish list, and then things were going so well that we decided to empty out another bedroom.
Wow.
And we just stripped the carpet out of there, and Jana was taking the trim down today and sanding, and we'll get the wood flooring going in there too.
Great. Yeah, you mentioned your empty nesters. I'm not. That's why I'm doing this. I'm actually on my front porch. You see a lot of the weekly break report videos I record are done on my front porch. So I have the opposite. I'm just trying to maintain over here. I'm not really, having time to do too many home projects.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you guys have your hands full with without school being in.
Absolutely, yeah.
And my wife's talking. She's actually, I'll show you her. We kind of encroached on her work area with some of the bedroom stuff, but she's teaching Zooming remotely for her kids. She's a 4th grade teacher in the Walled Lake School District. So we're both working from home, and in between our work responsibilities, we're trying to get this home project done too.
Yeah, so is your wife staying busy with that? Because I know some school districts around my area are doing the full online learning thing, and then some other school districts don't have the resources. So Walled Lake's engaged in that.
She is, and it's been pretty variable. Initially they thought it would just be a couple weeks, and then it's got extended, and now the expectations are growing, and it's being more engagement all the time. So they do at least one Zoom, if not 2 a week with the whole class. And then she's meeting with students and parents, online, one-on-one as well.
Excellent. Now, you and I talked a little bit prior to this, just to kind of set up this call. And you had mentioned to me, some family members of yours have actually come down with the coronavirus. I don't know if you want to tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. I keep getting up showing you stuff. I'll show you the picture of the daughters.
I love it.
So the one with the red scarf, that's Ashley. She's in her last year of residency down in Detroit. And the other one, Danielle. Danielle's good. She didn't catch it, but Ashley actually came down with the virus. I'm pretty sure it was in late February, early March. And she was working at her clinic down in Detroit and thinks that she got it there. And she had the symptoms, but they weren't as severe She had a test done, but the test ended up being corrupted, so they couldn't make any conclusion from it, but she had all the symptoms and she's fully recovered. She's back to work.
So did she have to quarantine in the house and not see her family for 2 weeks or whatever it was, or how'd that go down?
She quarantined, and her significant other also came down with the symptoms. And so they were self-quarantined for a couple of weeks. In fact, we haven't seen her since then. I haven't seen her since the beginning of February. I don't think my wife's seen her for even longer than that. So, but she's doing well and she's recovered. And I heard you had a couple as well.
Yeah, I did. So actually, I have some breaking news for you. So a couple of my cousins got it. The one works at a Chrysler dealership. He's a mechanic, and somebody came in. This is, again, at the beginning stages of when all this started happening. He came down with it. They live in a smaller home, family, I think, of four. They have 4 kids, and then the wife. He's the sole income. So scary times for sure. And he had to go quarantine basically up in the attic for 2 weeks. And similar to kind of what you were saying, he couldn't get a test. They basically told him that just to stay put, self-isolate, and if things get real bad, then you can go to the hospital. He ended up, just pulling out of it, but there was a couple days there where it got a little touch and go. But yeah, I had a couple family members that had it, and I just found out prior to this call, my dad got diagnosed with pneumonia. He was feeling a little shortness of breath, and so the natural, obviously, thought for us is, well, you better go get a coronavirus test. So he's going tomorrow. So hopefully everything's okay there. The doctor thinks it's just a little bit of pneumonia, but you never know.
Yeah, that's rough. Now, where does he live?
He lives in Sterling Heights, so he's about 10 minutes from me. I'm in Macomb Township. He's actually retired from Henry Ford Health Systems as a director of pharmacy. My whole family works there too, so I know the medical people real well, but just hoping it's just pneumonia and not something else.
Yeah, me too. We're getting the antibody test as soon as it's available too. I went to Minnesota back in January, and I came down with the nastiest cold. I had a flu test that came back negative, and it's all the symptoms of what the coronavirus has been. So I have no idea, but we're going to go in, both Jan and I, as soon as that test is available. We're on a couple of wait lists right now, and we're hoping in the next week or 2 we can see if we have any of the antibodies.
Yeah, that'd be real interesting. I suspect there's a lot of people out there that maybe had something similar to what you're talking about, or just didn't get tested. So it'd be interesting to see what the actual antibody stuff comes back with.
Yeah, and my daughter and Dante, her boyfriend, never were officially tested, so they're not even on the count, I don't think, and they both probably had it. So I got a feeling the numbers are a lot higher than what they're talking about.
Yeah, same for my family, same thing. So I would agree with you there. Not to change topics off coronavirus, I'm sure a lot of people are watching this are probably, looking to hear into other things as well. But I guess give me a little bit about your role at KB Autosystems and what's going on with them, the status, plants, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, KB Autosys is a company Korea-based. We're strong in Asia and focus on OE brake pads.
Okay.
We've got our headquarters in South Korea, and we've got plants in South Korea, China, and India. Mm-hmm. And we've been working with GM and Hyundai for many years and trying to get established here in the U.S., support some of our U.S. customers, and build some of our business here. So talking to the OEs and the tier 1s, we've got a engineering center that we're starting in Farmington Hills. Had Brian Hegman over there a few months ago before this whole thing hit the fan. And we got a dyno up and running, a couple more on the way, and we're looking to support our North American customers with some engineering test services and some application engineering support.
Where are your plant locations? Do you have anything in North America, or is there plans to put something in North America?
There's a lot of talk and investigation going on right now. There's nothing finalized, and this virus kind of put a few programs and a few things behind, but that's still under serious consideration. Yep, but too early to really announce anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going through a couple of things I know you're involved in. We talked a little bit earlier about this, but I'm looking at a list of things of here that we kind of took notes on, and it says you're involved in the SAE Brake Lining Standards Committee. I don't know anything about that, but I do know you're involved in some of the stuff that I dealt with when I prior worked at Trelleborg and the Shims. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing with SAE and what that all involves for you.
Yeah, with the Brake Linings Committee, I've been involved with a lot of those technical committees for a number of years, probably back into the 90s with the Dyno Committee and NVH. And on the linings committee, I took over chairmanship a few years ago. And we got a group of about 25 to 30 people spread across the industry from, the shim suppliers, backing plate suppliers, tier ones, pad suppliers, OEs. So we've got really good representation. And we meet quarterly. There's 8 or 10 topics that we're kind of trying to tackle right now. Obviously, emissions is a big one.
Yeah.
Like you said, on the shim side, there's a new one, adhesive ooze out.
Oh, I know all about it.
Yeah, that one's an interesting topic. It's funny how, I was kind of naive back in the 90s when I got involved, and they were doing this compressibility test.
Yeah.
And from the OE side, a lot of compressibility, the real light loads is important to us, and the standards didn't account for that. So
yeah,
over the years I've been kind of involved. I never realized how difficult and challenging it can be just to measure the deflection properties of a brake pad and noise shim. It's just amazing to me. And we've got 4 or 5 activities in the linings committee between hot compressibility, shim adhesive ooze out, the characterization of compressibility test stands to make sure that you've got good quality data, thermal swell and growth. Those are all some of the topics that we're currently working on.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I can speak to shims from my background and my experience. Obviously, the adhesive is designed to become viscous, to add damping properties. And so tracking that from a room temp state to different braking temperatures under different pressures, how that changes over time is very, very difficult. Prior to my leaving of Trelleborg, I was working really, really closely with a large tier one. I won't say the name here on this call, just for proprietary reasons. There's a lot of good work going on, and maybe you're involved in some of that around trying to keep the shim adhesive underneath the shim, so you don't have these changes in properties as the brake degrades and heats up and cools down.
Yeah, and you wouldn't think, it's that big of a deal, but it really is. From the noise properties and what they're trying to do now with brake drag, and even on the e-boost systems, that first fill to get to peak tire traction capability and its effect on stopping distance, that amount of fluid displacement that the e-boost has to push out and do it real quickly is a pretty big factor. And the brake pads can account for quite a bit of both the absolute value and the variation that occurs in that first fluid fill. Yeah. So it's an ongoing topic that has a lot of good discussion and a lot of good technical work going on.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and it's going to be changing, especially like, as you mentioned, we get more and more sensitive to brake drag and trying to measuring that kind of stuff, especially with pad deflection and that kind of stuff, which leads me to another thing that's underneath the list of responsibilities that you're talking about, and that is dimensional characteristics of backing plates and how that changes maybe with different underlayers and just, how they deflect underneath the caliper, piston, or fingers. What are you doing around that?
And aging and just the whole manufacturing process. And yeah, it's crazy. There's a good team of people. It's currently being led by a tier one. Again, we won't get into any specific company names, and a lot of backplate suppliers have been involved, and shim suppliers are aware of it. But yeah, that's a whole field that there isn't a common industry standard for yet. And it's a pretty important topic. So there's a group of people working on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping with the same thing with the SAE stuff, my last video I did was with Link Engineering, and one of the things we showed off when I was there was around brake emissions. When you say emissions earlier, I don't suspect you're talking about tailpipe emissions. You're talking about brake emissions. What are you doing around brake emissions specifically, and are you working with the guys at Link and other suppliers like that to kind of combat this?
Yeah, exactly. Link is involved. There's an OE that's heavily involved with that. They're working directly with the group, I can't remember their name, in Europe, that is really heading on a lot of the global activities. And plus they're coordinated with California. They're looking into it. There's a lot of interest, and we've got a couple members that are intimately involved with the discussions and the technology development and the testing of that and the procedures and reporting back to our committee. We're not doing anything separate from what is already occurring globally, other than a couple of our members are on those global teams to keep tabs of what's going on and provide input. Okay. But yeah, that is an area that's going to be it's under a lot of scrutiny. A lot of things are getting developed. It looks like we've got some good test standards coming out of it, and most likely some regulatory requirements I think will be in the horizon in the next few years.
Yeah, this is a little bit of an offshoot from where we're heading, but what are you seeing around the way of the things we talked about with either like the shim adhesive ooze out stuff, or dimensions of backplates, or even emissions? What are you seeing for internal combustion engine type applications versus electric vehicle? And as we think about maybe heading towards electric vehicle, how is that changing your approach, if anything?
Well, the corrosion resistance and the life expectations of backing plates and shims staying bonded and shims not corroding. So, you know, the whole steel and shims being galvanized and backing plate coatings and kind of the longevity of those parts. And then the usage is going to be so much different too on electric vehicles with regen braking. Mm-hmm. I think over time, sizing will address that as well, and our friction brakes will get smaller. There's nothing immediately happening on that front, but I see that as a trend too. But definitely the corrosion resistance, the longevity of the brake pads and noise shims, those are things that are changing as right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, speaking back to my history, I know trying to address the corrosion resistance through different steel materials or whatever it might be. But when you change steel materials, you change the properties of maybe what's even in the shim or something else that might have impact on durability or other things. So I think it's interesting where that's gonna head, and maybe what your involvement is with some of that.
Yep.
So speaking of SAE stuff, I reported on the brake report weekly stuff that I've been doing that I think it was FMSI and Eurobrake have been canceled. But my understanding is SAE brake colloquium is still scheduled to happen, and you're involved in that. So I guess if you want to speak on that, that'd be.
Yeah, yep. The SAE is still on track. At this point, there's been almost 100 technical paper submissions. So from a technology perspective, things are on track. Now, how things are affected with the virus and the limited, the social distancing requirements, that's still up in the air. And then, the financial impact of a lot of what's going on right now too. It's not really clear, in my mind anyways, what companies' travel budgets will be like for participating in something like this. But at this point, it's on track. There's a lot of submissions for the technical papers. There'll be sessions on, emissions and CAE and NVH and testing and all the standard technical sessions. And they're planning on the panels. I'm involved with the OEM panel, and we're still working on that and some other panels and tutorials, things like tribology. So at this point, the executive committee is still meeting and the technical committees are all meeting, and they're still planning for it. But as we all know, there's a lot of variables in place, and a lot can change or not change over the next few months. And it's really hard to say where the social distancing things and what the enthusiasm is going to be over big gatherings like that in the future. It's hard to say.
Yeah, obviously, like to your point, a lot of these things are canceled. So is marketing budget being reallocated, or people putting that elsewhere? And then to your point, the global travel, there's gonna be a lot of probably hesitation around something like that. But you had mentioned that there's a lot of technical papers or abstracts that were submitted. Any hot topics sticking out above anything else?
Oh boy, I haven't reviewed them in too much detail, but I know emissions is a big topic these days. But yeah, I don't have a lot of insight on. It's going to be similar to the standard type sessions that have been done in the past.
What about for the panels? Have you guys selected topics for that yet, or are you guys still going through that process?
Well, the tribology one is and that's going to be a tutorial. One of the tier twos, one of the wise old Indian types stepped up and is trying to lead that. And I'm trying to remember, we're always looking for the new technology kind of things, like e-boost is a good one. Yeah. But it's tough to get too much sharing going on in an open venue like that with some of the new technology. So we're definitely doing inquiries for things like that. Wheel bearings has been another area that's taken off a lot in the last couple of years. So I'm expecting another good session on wheel bearings. But yeah, that's about all the more I can comment on that.
Well, probably the most important part I got to ask about the SAE is, how has this lockdown impacted your preparation in golf game?
I was going to ask you the same thing. How's your golf game doing? Mine is non-existent. In fact, I've got a backyard that's big enough to get my pitching wedge out, and I haven't really been doing much of that yet either. So it's going to be dismal. I
haven't played at all. I'm expecting to head north this week. Granted, everything okay with my dad. When it comes back, my dad okay, and I was going to get my first round in. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a case of the shanks for a little while. In fact, I'll pick this up. You can see down my street maybe. At the end of that street down there is a golf course, and it just pains me. I can't just walk down the street and go tee off. But
well, it's open now though, isn't it?
It is. Yep. And so I got the kids, so I can't leave them. That wouldn't be good parenting. I'd probably be in trouble there.
Yeah, I just got a text from the guy that runs I was in a golf league. I temporarily retired, a few years ago, and so I had a lot of free time. And now I'm back working more full-time on a salary position, so I don't have as much free time. But I was still able to go out golfing in a league a lot last year, and they're starting to kick that off again this year. So, but we have to walk, and so that'll put a little damper on things for a while.
Not to go totally off topic on golf, but I find when I walk, after I hit a bad shot, I have enough time to cool down and like not go up and try and hit the next shot and make another mistake. So yeah, I actually prefer walking. It just slows the game down a little bit, but
I do 2 for 9. I don't know about 18 anymore. I might be getting a little too old for that, but a 9 it's a great time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Walking too.
That's all I have in terms of questions, Rick. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to bring up or discuss before we close this one off, but
no, I think we hit a lot of the topics.